Most exorcisms begin with a prayer. This one began with a scream. The sound tore through the church like a blade through silence. Dust drifted from the cracked ceiling beams. Candles trembled along the stone floor. And kneeling before the ruined altar, a young woman's body twisted in ways no human body should ever move. Her name was Elena, and something inside her had just started speaking. Her fingers scraped against the cold stone floor as if she were trying to hold on to something, anything that could keep her anchored to the world she knew. Her breathing came in sharp, uneven gasps. For a moment, it looked like she might win, like whatever darkness was inside her might lose its grip. But then her back arched violently. Her head bent backward at an angle that made a sickening crack echo through the empty hall. Her eyes opened, glowing white, unblinking, watching something above the ceiling, something no one else could see. The wind outside rattled the broken stained glass. Moonlight spilled across the floor like pale water, and somewhere behind the rows of rotting wooden pews, footsteps approached, slow, measured. Father Marcus stepped into the dim light. He was older than most priests who performed exorcisms. His hair had long since turned silver, and the lines in his face spoke of years spent staring into darkness most men never believed existed. But even he hesitated, because something about this night felt different. He could feel it in the air, like the pressure before a storm, or the moment before lightning strikes. In one hand, he held a worn leather Bible. In the other, a silver crucifix that had belonged to his mentor decades ago. He raised it carefully. "Elena," he said softly, "if you can hear me, you must fight it." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the girl's head turned slowly. Her glowing eyes locked onto him, and she smiled. But the smile did not belong to her. When Elena spoke, two voices answered. One was hers, weak, frightened, buried somewhere deep inside. The other voice was older, deeper, and filled with a hatred that felt ancient. "You are too late." The words scraped through the room like rusted metal dragged across stone. Father Marcus stepped forward. "You have no authority here," he said firmly. "In the name of God, I command you, leave this child." Elena laughed, but it was not the laugh of a young woman. It sounded like something learning how to imitate human sound. The candles flickered, then one went out, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire church was swallowed by darkness. Only the faint moonlight from the shattered windows remained. The wooden pews began to shake. Dust fell from the rafters, and the air grew colder. Much colder. Father Marcus could see his breath now. Elena's body suddenly stopped trembling. Her head tilted slowly to one side, like an animal studying something curious. "You think this is about the girl?" The voice chuckled. "You misunderstand the invitation." Behind her, something moved along the wall. At first, it looked like an ordinary shadow, but shadows don't move unless something moves with them. This one was growing, stretching, climbing up the cracked stone surface, and slowly, two enormous horns began to form. Father Marcus felt his chest tighten, because in that moment, he understood something terrifying. The demon inside Elena was not the real problem. It was only the doorway. Without warning, Elena's body lifted from the ground, slowly, silently. Her feet rose several inches above the stone floor. Her arms hung limp at her sides. Her head remained tilted backward as if something invisible was pulling her upward by the spine. Father Marcus began reciting the exorcism prayer. His voice echoed through the hollow church. The crucifix in his hand glowed faintly, but Elena only laughed again. Her mouth opened, far too wide. Black smoke poured from her throat. It spilled into the air like ink spreading through water, and inside the swirling darkness, something began to form. A face, large, distorted, watching. The walls began to tremble. Cracks spread across the stone floor. Candles exploded into sparks as supernatural wind tore through the hall. And then the smoke twisted, revealing glowing red eyes inside the darkness. Eyes that were far too large to belong to the girl. The shadow behind Elena expanded across the entire wall. Its horns stretched toward the ceiling. Its body grew wider, longer, until it filled the entire sanctuary. The demon was enormous. Even though it existed only as shadow and smoke, its eyes burned like coals in a furnace. And when it spoke, the church itself seemed to vibrate with the sound. "You called my name." Father Marcus's heart pounded, but he did not lower the cross. "I called nothing," the demon chuckled. "Oh, but you did." Its massive shadow leaned closer. "You opened the door." The priest's voice trembled slightly. "What are you?" The creature smiled, and its answer echoed through the church like thunder. "I am the one who was waiting." For a few seconds, Father Marcus could do nothing except stare. The girl floated before the altar, her body suspended in the air like a broken marionette. Behind her, that impossible shadow stretched across the wall and ceiling, swelling with each second, as if the church itself were too small to contain it. The old priest had spent most of his life preparing for moments like this. Long nights in stone libraries, whispered lessons from men who believed evil was not a metaphor, but a presence. Warnings carved into the margins of forbidden texts. He knew the rules. A demon's name mattered. A true name gave shape to what should remain shapeless. It gave edges to darkness. And once darkness had edges, it could be fought. At least, that was the belief. He tightened his grip on the crucifix until the metal bit into his palm. "Elena," he said first, hoping there was still enough of the girl left to hear him. "If you are still inside, you must resist. Do not listen to it. Do not answer it." The levitating body did not react. Only the smoke kept pouring from her mouth. Only the shadow kept growing. The church groaned around them. Dust drifted from above. The broken remains of stained glass trembled in their frames as wind hissed through the empty openings. Then Father Marcus lifted the cross higher and planted his feet on the cracked stone floor. His voice rose, stronger now, echoing through the sanctuary. "In the name of the Almighty, I command you, reveal yourself." The red eyes in the shadow narrowed. The black smoke shivered. He stepped closer. "I command you," he said again, louder this time. "Tell me your name." For the first time since the ritual began, everything stopped. The wind died. The smoke slowed. Even Elena's floating body seemed to freeze in place, as though the entire church had been suspended inside a single held breath. And in that breathless silence, Father Marcus realized something. The demon was listening. Not resisting. Listening. As if the question itself interested it. As if it had been waiting to hear those exact words. A cold unease slid into his chest. His mentor had once told him that evil does not always break the rules. Sometimes it waits for you to use them. The demon's laughter came low at first. Not from Elena's mouth. Not from the shadow. From everywhere. From the walls. From the rafters. from beneath the stone floor. 1,000 dry voices layered on top of one another until the sound became something almost impossible to bear. Then Elena's mouth moved, but when the answer came, the voice belonged to something much larger than the girl. "You should not have asked." The church shook violently. One of the remaining stained glass panels shattered inward, spraying colored fragments across the aisle. Candles melted down all at once, wax running over stone like pale flesh. Father Marcus felt the temperature drop again, so fast that his fingers went numb around the crucifix. Still, he forced himself not to step back. "You are bound," he said, though the words sounded less certain than before. "You must obey." The red eyes brightened. The demon's shadow stretched wider over the walls and ceiling until the whole sanctuary seemed wrapped in one enormous living stain. "No," it whispered. And that single word carried so much weight that Father Marcus's knees almost buckled. The force of it pressed against him physically, like invisible hands pushing against his chest. He had seen people possessed before. He had heard lies, threats, blasphemies, the empty rage of things that wanted to frighten men of faith. This was different. This thing was not performing. It was not trapped. It was not begging for escape. It was in control. And suddenly the old priest understood the first terrible piece of the truth. He had not cornered the demon. The demon had cornered him. The moment the realization struck him, Elena's body dropped. One instant she was hanging in midair, head thrown back, smoke pouring from her mouth. The next, she crashed onto the stone floor with a sound that echoed through the sanctuary. Father Marcus flinched and rushed toward her instinctively. "Elena." The black smoke vanished. The levitation ended. The trembling ceased. For one brief, desperate heartbeat, hope rose in him. Maybe that was it. Maybe whatever had infested her had been driven out. Maybe the ritual, despite everything, had worked. He knelt beside her and touched 2 fingers to the side of her neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. Relief started to form. Then the church became silent. Not ordinary silence. Not the kind left after shouting stops. This silence felt unnatural, like the entire world had leaned in to listen. Father Marcus slowly lifted his head. The red glow from the shadow on the wall had not faded. If anything, it had deepened. The altar behind Elena stood drowned in crimson light, its cracked stone edges trembling beneath the weight of something unseen. Then came a sound, a slow scraping noise, stone against stone, like claws being dragged over a crypt lid from the inside. Father Marcus rose carefully, every muscle in his body tightening. The sound came again, longer this time, behind him. Very slowly, he turned. At first, he saw only the wall, cracked plaster, faded paintings of saints, long stains of water damage running down from the ceiling. Then the wall itself moved. No, not the wall, the darkness on it. The shadow bulged outward as though something huge was pressing from the other side. A claw emerged first. Long, jointed, black as burned bone. It pushed through the shadow and into the sanctuary, digging into the stone as if the darkness were nothing more than a curtain. Then came another claw, and another. The red eyes opened fully, not flat on the wall now, but forward-facing, separate, attached to a shape that was slowly giving itself depth. Father Marcus stumbled back. His heel struck a broken pew and nearly sent him down. That was impossible. Demons influenced. They whispered. They possessed. They did not simply step into the world like men walking through a doorway. And yet that was exactly what was happening. The thing emerging from the wall was not smoke anymore. It was gathering substance. Horns curved upward from a skull-like head, shoulders unfolded beneath skin that looked as though it had been made from night itself. Vast arms reached outward, ending in claws sharp enough to cut the air. The church filled with deep red light. Not light cast from flame or moon. Something older. Something infernal. Elena remained motionless on the floor. The crucifix in Father Marcus's hand had gone cold. He raised it anyway, though now it felt absurdly small. By the holy, the demon moved its head slightly, and the words died in his throat. It had not roared. It had not attacked. It had merely looked at him. That was enough. Every prayer he had ever memorized seemed to retreat from his mind at once. The demon's lips, if they could be called that, parted into a smile too wide to belong to any earthly creature. "You wanted my answer," it said. Its voice was no longer layered through the church. Now it stood in front of him, and the sound came from its mouth. Deep, measured, almost calm. "So look at me." The priest did. He wished he hadn't. There was intelligence in those eyes. Not madness, not chaos. Patience, calculation. This thing had not stumbled into the ritual. It had orchestrated it. And that realization landed harder than fear. Because fear still leaves room for survival. But understanding? Understanding told him he was standing at the center of a trap that had been waiting far longer than his own lifetime. The demon took one step forward. The floor beneath it cracked. The candles relit themselves in dark red flames. And somewhere high above them, hidden in the rafters, bells that had not rung in decades began to tremble. Father Marcus had faced evil before. He had seen men mutilated by guilt, women hollowed out by voices no one else could hear, children who spoke in languages they had never learned. He had seen enough darkness to know that faith was not armor. It was only a lantern, and lanterns, no matter how bright, do not stop the night from existing. But this was something beyond possession, beyond infestation, beyond all the words the church had created to make such things sound understandable. The demon stood fully inside the sanctuary now. Its horns nearly touched the arch above the altar. Its shape was broad enough to blot out the ruined paintings behind it. Its shadow poured over every surface, swallowing stone columns, broken pews, and crumbling saintly faces in blackness edged with red. It did not rush him. That was the true horror. It moved with absolute certainty, like a king entering a room already convinced of his own victory. Father Marcus wanted to pray, but something had happened to his voice. His throat felt tight, constricted, as if the air itself had thickened. He could hear his own pulse. He could hear the faint hiss of red candle flames. He could hear Elena breathing weakly where she lay on the floor. And over all of it, he could hear the creature's claws lightly scraping the stone as it advanced. One step, then another. Slow enough for him to feel each second. Slow enough for dread to mature fully inside him. The demon tilted its head, studying him. Its eyes glowed brighter, and Father Marcus saw something he wished he could unsee forever. Recognition. The creature knew him, not just as prey, as a person, as if it had been aware of him before this night. "You are smaller than I expected," it said. Father Marcus forced himself to swallow. "In the name of God, I..." The demon's smile widened. "No," it said softly. "Do not hide behind borrowed words now." Borrowed words. The phrase struck him strangely, because suddenly, with the creature towering before him, Father Marcus became painfully aware of how many prayers he had recited over the years, simply because other men had recited them first. How many rituals he had inherited. How many ancient formulas he had trusted because he had needed to trust something. And for one flashing moment, doubt entered him. Only a sliver. But demons, he knew, could smell doubt like blood in water. The creature bent lower. Its face came close enough that the priest felt heat radiating from it in waves, though the church around them remained freezing cold. "You have spent your life believing you were the hunter," it murmured. "But hunters still answer when called." Father Marcus did not understand. Then he thought of Elena. He thought of how suddenly the case had come to him, how urgent it had seemed. How strange that no bishop had objected to sending only one aging priest to perform the rite in a remote church, long since forgotten by most of the diocese. He thought of the old records, the missing pages, the silence surrounding this place. And beneath the fear, another feeling rose. Not panic, regret. Because he could finally see the shape of the lie. This church had not been chosen because it was empty. It had been chosen because something here was already waiting. The demon straightened to its full height. Behind it, the ruined altar cracked down the middle with a loud splitting sound. Dust rained from above. One of the hanging beams groaned and sagged. The whole sanctuary seemed to recoil from the being that now occupied it. Elena stirred on the floor. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. Father Marcus glanced at her, and in that tiny distraction, the demon moved faster than anything that size should have been able to move. It crossed the distance between them in an instant and stopped inches from him. Not touching. Just there. The old priest's heart hammered so violently, he thought it might stop. The demon's eyes narrowed, and then, in a voice almost gentle, it asked, "Do you know what frightened her most?" Father Marcus said nothing. The creature looked down toward Elena. "She never feared that I would kill her," it said. "She feared that I would leave." The priest stared. The demon smiled again. "She thought she was the vessel." Its gaze returned to him. But the vessel was never the point. That sentence settled over him like a death sentence. Because now he understood the second terrible piece of the truth: Elena had never been the destination. She had been bait. The crucifix slipped from Father Marcus's fingers. It struck the floor with a sharp, metallic crack and spun once before lying still between them. The demon looked down at it, then back at him, amused. That single gesture, the falling of the cross, seemed to change something inside the church. The red candle flames flared higher, the shadows deepened, and whatever fragile confidence the old priest had carried into the ritual finally broke. Behind him, Elena pushed herself weakly onto one elbow. She was pale, shaking, barely conscious, but conscious enough now to see. And what she saw was not the battle she had prayed for, not a priest overcoming evil, not a miracle. She saw Father Marcus standing motionless before the thing that had used her body as a door. She saw the cross on the ground. She saw fear on a priest's face, and that, more than the demon itself, filled her with terror. "Father," she whispered. The sound of her voice cut through him. He wanted to turn toward her, wanted to tell her to run, to close her eyes, to pray, to do anything except witness what was about to happen. But he could not move. The demon had not touched him, yet his body felt anchored to the stone floor. Red light curled around his ankles like smoke. He looked down and saw thin tendrils of shadow winding upward from the cracks beneath his feet. The creature stepped back slowly, almost ceremonially, as though giving him room to understand, room to despair. "You asked for my name," it said. Father Marcus's lips trembled. "What are you?" The demon's claws scraped across the floor as it circled him. "I am what remains," it replied, "after men forget what they were warned about." It passed behind him, and though the priest could not see it, he felt its presence at his back like the mouth of a furnace. "When this church was built," it continued, "they buried more than bones beneath it." Images flashed through his mind. Old builders, half-finished stone, whispered blessings, secret rites performed not to welcome holiness, but to imprison something. His stomach tightened. The old records, the missing pages, not missing, removed, hidden because someone had known, and someone had failed. Elena tried to crawl backward across the floor. Her breathing was ragged. Tears streaked the dirt and ash on her face. "Please," she whispered. She didn't seem to know whether she was speaking to the priest or to God. The demon ignored her. Its focus remained fixed on Marcus. "You came here thinking you would cast me out," it said, "but you were chosen long before the girl." The words struck deeper than any wound. Chosen. He thought back over the last few weeks. The sudden letter, the urgency, the insistence that he alone handled the matter because of his experience. He had accepted without question. Pride had hidden itself inside duty, and he had called it obedience. Now he could see it clearly. He had not been selected by the church. He had been delivered. The demon came into view again, stopping in front of him. It leaned down until its burning eyes filled his vision. "Elena was only the first mouth," it said. "You were meant to be the voice." The priest's knees weakened. He understood now why the creature had not torn him apart, why it had not crushed him when it had the chance, why it had allowed the ritual to continue. Because this was not an execution. It was an anointing. He tried once more to pray, but the words came out fractured, broken before they fully formed. The demon inhaled slowly, savoring his helplessness. Then it whispered the final thing that made the truth impossible to deny. "She was never my home." Its gaze sharpened. "You are." And in that moment, Father Marcus realized the last, most devastating truth of all. The exorcism had succeeded. The demon had left Elena, just not in the way he had prayed. For one suspended second, no one moved. The church held its breath. Elena, half-conscious on the stone floor, stared through strands of dark hair with eyes too wide to blink. Father Marcus stood rigid beneath the cracked arch of the sanctuary, every line in his face drained of certainty. And before him, towering in the crimson half-light, the demon watched with the patient stillness of something that had already decided how the night would end. Then it moved. Not with the violence Marcus had feared, not with claws or teeth. It leaned closer, slowly, intimately, like a man about to share a secret. Its vast shadow rolled over him first, swallowing the old priest from the feet upward. The red candlelight warped across his black robes. The demon's face lowered until those furnace-bright eyes hovered inches from his own. Marcus could smell something impossible. Burnt incense, wet stone, old graves opened after rain, and beneath it all, something metallic and sweet, like blood dried on silver. He tried to step back. His body refused. He tried to raise his hands. They hung useless at his sides. The tendrils of darkness winding around his ankles tightened, and a sharp cold shot up through his legs into his spine. The demon smiled. "You asked for my name," it whispered. Its voice was soft now. Soft enough that Elena barely heard it from where she lay. But Marcus heard every word as though the sound were forming inside his skull. "You thought a name would give you power." The demon's claw hovered near the priest's chest, not touching, just tracing the air above his heart. "You still believe evil must rage to be real." Marcus swallowed with effort. His lips trembled. "God will not..." The demon tilted its head. "Will not what?" It sounded almost curious. "Abandon you?" The priest's eyes flickered. That was enough. The creature saw the doubt open in him like a cut, and once it saw it, it pressed deeper. "You have served for decades," the demon murmured. "You buried children. You blessed graves. You listened to men confess the same sins until their guilt sounded mechanical. You prayed over mothers who lost sons, over sons who hated fathers, over the dying, the cruel, the lonely, the forgotten." Its red eyes narrowed. "And when heaven answered with silence, you called that faith." Marcus's breath caught, because the cruelty of it was not that the demon lied. It was that it spoke like something that had stood beside him every time his prayers had vanished into the dark. Elena dragged herself backward a few inches, her fingers slipping on dust and broken wax. "Father," she whispered, her voice splitting with panic. "Don't listen." The demon didn't even glance at her. Its gaze remained fixed on Marcus. "I do not need your permission," it said, "only your emptiness." The priest tried to pray again, but the words came fractured and useless. He could remember scripture. He could remember ritual. He could remember every command meant to bind a thing like this. But memory is not conviction. And conviction had begun to rot. The demon opened one clawed hand. Red light gathered in its palm, not like flame, but like liquid thought, thick, pulsing, alive. "This is the part men misunderstand," it said. "Possession is not invasion." The light brightened. "It is agreement." Marcus's eyes widened. "No." The denial came out weak. More breath than word. The demon leaned closer until its forehead nearly touched his. "Yes." Then the red light moved. It slid out from the demon's hand in long strands, thin as veins, wrapping around Marcus's wrists, his throat, his chest. He gasped as the cold gave way to heat. Violent, unbearable heat that felt less like burning and more like being hollowed out from the inside. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. The darkness held him upright. Elena screamed his name. The demon spoke over her. "You opened the door," it said. "Now stand in it." And with that, the red energy surged into him. Marcus's body arched violently. A raw sound tore from his throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a prayer. His spine bent backward, his fingers curled into claws, veins blackened beneath the skin of his neck and hands. His eyes rolled white, then red, then white again, as the thing forced itself through whatever remained of him. The whole church shook. Stone cracked. The altar split farther down the middle. Above them, the old bell finally gave one deafening broken toll. Elena threw her arms over her head as dust and splinters rained from the ceiling. Marcus convulsed once, twice, then went perfectly still. The red tendrils vanished. The church fell silent. The demon stepped back. Its towering shape had not disappeared yet, but it looked thinner now, less solid, as though much of what had given it form had left with the transfer. Father Marcus swayed in place. His head hung low. His chest rose once, then again. Elena stared, trembling, her mouth open in soundless horror. "Father?" she whispered. Marcus slowly lifted his face. His eyes were glowing red, and when he smiled, it was not the old priest smiling. At first, Elena could not move. Her body had already endured too much. Pain, terror, the memory of something wearing her from the inside. But what froze her now was not weakness. It was recognition. Not of the thing before her, of what had been lost. Father Marcus still stood in the center of the sanctuary. He wore the same black robes, the same silver at his temples, the same tired face carved by years of faith and grief. But the man inside that face was gone. His eyes burned with a deep, unnatural red that pulsed faintly in the shadows. His mouth held that same small, calm smile the demon had worn when it spoke of purpose. And behind him, cast against the cracked wall by the crimson candles, his shadow no longer matched his shape. It had horns, large ones, curving up from his head like a crown made of darkness. The cross lay broken at his feet, not snapped cleanly, crushed, as if something had stepped on it after it fell. Elena pushed herself backward, palms scraping over the stone floor. Her breathing came fast and shallow. Her heartbeat pounded in her throat. Every instinct in her body screamed the same command: run. But Father Marcus, whatever wore him now, did not rush her. He simply watched, and that patience made him worse. The new thing inside him looked down at its hands and slowly opened and closed them, flexing the fingers as though testing the weight of skin, bone, movement. It turned one palm toward the red candles. The flames leaned toward him, not with wind, with obedience. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. This wasn't an exorcism anymore. It wasn't even survival. It was witnessing. Watching a man become a doorway. "Father Marcus," she said, though the name already sounded wrong in her mouth. His head tilted. When he answered, the voice was his, and not his. The same human tone, but deeper, stretched by something ancient moving beneath it. "He is still here," the priest said. Elena's breath caught. The smile widened. Somewhere. She shook her head immediately, refusing to believe it, refusing to picture the old priest conscious beneath that voice, beneath those eyes, trapped and forced to watch through his own skin. The possessed priest took one slow step forward. Elena flinched. The broken church groaned around them. Red candlelight flickered over smashed pews and fallen plaster. Rain hissed somewhere outside through shattered glass, and the open spaces where stained windows had once stood let strips of cold moonlight cut across the aisle. "You are afraid," the priest said. This time the voice sounded amused. Elena's throat tightened. "Stay away from me." The priest glanced down at the stone floor where she had fallen earlier, at the place where her body had convulsed, while the demon used her. His expression remained calm, but the thing inside his eyes darkened. "You were useful," he said. "You endured more than most would have." The words landed like a second violation. Useful, not chosen, not spared, not saved, used. Elena's hands curled into fists. For the first time since the ritual began, something other than fear rose in her chest. Anger, thin, fragile, but real. "You took everything," she whispered. The priest stopped, and for one instant, so brief she almost thought she imagined it, something flickered across his face. Pain, not the demons. Marcus's. A trapped, desperate human pain that broke through like light under a locked door. Elena saw it. The possessed priest seemed to feel that she had seen it too. His smile vanished at once. His shoulders stiffened, and when he spoke again, the gentleness was gone. "No," he said quietly. "I was given everything." The red flames rose higher. The horned shadow behind him stretched across the wall, across the altar, across the floor between them. Elena scrambled backward faster, her heel striking the leg of a fallen pew. She grabbed it, pulled herself up halfway, then stumbled as the priest took another step. This time there was no hesitation in him, no trace of Marcus, only hunger wrapped in robes, only purpose. And Elena understood with sickening clarity that if she stayed where she was, she would not survive the next few seconds. So she turned and ran. She didn't think. Thinking would have slowed her down. She lunged through the ruined aisle, slipping on broken stone, catching herself on shattered pews, nearly falling as her numb legs struggled to remember how to obey fear. Her breath tore in and out of her chest, her vision blurred with tears, smoke, and red light. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Not fast. That was the worst part. The possessed priest was following at a walking pace, measured, unhurried, the way something follows when it already knows you can't truly escape. The church doors stood at the far end of the nave, half split, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Beyond them, lightning flashed across the storm outside, illuminating sheets of rain and the dark line of trees beyond the church grounds. Elena ran harder. Her shoulder slammed into one of the doors. It burst outward with a groan of rotten wood and iron. Cold rain hit her instantly. She stumbled down the stone steps and into mud, nearly collapsing as thunder rolled over the field. Behind her, another lightning flash lit the doorway. And there he was. Father Marcus stood beneath the broken arch, not crossing it, not yet. Rain blew in around him, but he remained almost perfectly still, framed by red candlelight and shadow. His eyes glowed in the dark like coals. The storm painted his face white, then black, then white again. Elena backed away from the steps, barefoot in the mud, her ruined dress clinging to her skin, her hair plastered to her cheeks. She wanted to turn and run into the trees, toward the road, toward anywhere that was not this place. But she couldn't stop looking at him, because some part of her still needed to know whether anything human remained. "Father Marcus!" she shouted over the storm. Thunder swallowed the name. He did not answer, only watched. Then the possessed priest stepped forward once, reaching the threshold. For a terrible moment, Elena thought he would come after her. But instead, he stopped exactly where the church shadow ended, and the rain began. Lightning cracked again, and in that sharp white light, Elena saw something she would remember for the rest of her life. His shadow behind him was still much larger than his body, still horned, still moving, even when he stood still. The priest lifted one hand slowly, not in blessing, not in farewell, in warning. And when he spoke, the voice carried through wind and rain with impossible clarity. "You were allowed to leave." Elena's face went cold. Allowed, not escaped, allowed. The truth of it hit her so hard, she nearly lost her footing again. If the demon wanted her dead, she would already be dead. If it wanted her back inside, it would drag her back. So why let her go? Because terror spreads faster than plague. Because survivors carry stories farther than corpses. Because some evils do not hide their existence. They advertise it. Elena turned and ran into the storm, through grass soaked black with rain, past leaning gravestones half swallowed by weeds, past the rusted gate hanging open at the edge of the churchyard. Behind her, thunder rolled again and again, but she did not look back a second time. She ran until her lungs burned, until the church was no longer visible, until the bell's last broken toll had dissolved into the sound of rain. Even then, she did not stop. Because she understood now that distance was not safety, and surviving the night was not the same as escaping it. By morning, the storm was gone. Mist drifted low over the fields around Hollow Creek. The trees stood dripping and still. Birds did not sing. The road leading to the church lay empty except for pooled water and broken branches scattered by the wind. From a distance, the church looked dead again. Quiet, harmless. Just stone, wood, and ruin. A place people had stopped caring about years ago. But inside, the sanctuary had changed. The cracked altar remained split down the center. The pews lay broken where fear and force had tossed them aside. Shattered fragments of stained glass glittered faintly in thin gray daylight. And standing before the altar, hands folded behind his back like a priest waiting for congregation, was Father Marcus, or what wore him. His eyes no longer blazed as brightly as they had during the ritual. In the cold morning light, they glowed like embers buried under ash, dimmer but alive, waiting for breath to turn them to flame again. He was perfectly still, listening. Somewhere under the church, deep below stone and root and wet earth, there came a faint sound. Not movement, not chains, something older, a pulse. The possessed priest lifted his head slightly, as though in response. Around him, the candles that had burned red through the night sat blackened and dead. Then, one by one, they relit. No spark touched them. No hand moved near them. Their flames rose slowly, dark red at the base, then brighter above, casting a sinister glow over the sanctuary walls. Behind the priest, the great shadow returned, not emerging now, not forcing itself through, simply present, spread across the wall in the unmistakable shape of horns, shoulders, claws, permanent. The broken cross still lay near the center of the floor. One arm was snapped. The silver had blackened where it touched the stone, as if something corrosive had seeped through it during the night. The priest turned his head and looked down at it. Then he smiled. Outside, far off in the distance, church bells began to ring, not the ruined bell above Hollow Creek. Other bells, from other parishes, morning bells, calling the faithful to prayer. The sound drifted across the countryside and entered through broken windows like an invitation or a challenge. The possessed priest listened to them for a long time. Then he stepped away from the altar. The horned shadow behind him stretched and moved with him now, no longer bound to the wall alone. It clung to his heels, rose along his shoulders, bent when he bent. A perfect union. Near the church entrance, rainwater had collected in shallow depressions in the stone. As he passed, he looked down into one of them. For a moment, his reflection was only his own. Then the water trembled, and the reflection smiling back at him had horns. At the edge of the churchyard, beyond the gate, the world was waking. Somewhere, people were making breakfast. Somewhere, a woman was lighting a candle for a sick child. Somewhere, a man was dressing for service, straightening his collar, preparing to speak to a room full of believers who had no idea what had walked into the world while they slept. The possessed priest stood in the doorway and looked out at all of it. The wet road, the low mist, the waiting day. A voice moved beneath his own when he finally spoke. Quiet, certain. We begin again. Then he stepped forward into morning, and the last truth settled over the ruins of Hollow Creek like ash. The demon had not been cast out. It had been invited forward. Elena had survived, but survival would not save her from memory. Father Marcus had fought, but faith alone had not closed the door. And somewhere ahead, beyond the churchyard and the road and the waking towns beyond, something holy was about to meet something patient, wearing the face of a priest. Because evil had not won in a moment of violence. It had won in a moment of transfer in a question asked too confidently. In doubt opened at exactly the wrong second, in the terrible mistake of believing the girl was the center of the ritual. She never was. She was only the first vessel, the first mouth, the first cry in a story that had not ended inside the church, only begun there. And long after the candles burned down, long after the storm water dried from the steps, long after Elena's footprints vanished from the mud, the warning remained. Not in scripture, not in the ruined walls, but in the shape of what came next. When a demon leaves one body, do not celebrate too quickly. Sometimes it leaves because it has found a better one.